Good afternoon, happy Constitution Day, and welcome to Liberty Day Institute's Visiting Scholars Series. We're going to get started in just a couple of moments with Attorney General Cynthia Coffman, so don't go anywhere. We've got a lot more coming up, and I will be right back. Good afternoon once again and welcome. We're just going to go ahead and get started. I know a lot of what we're going to be doing is passing along to folks that are unable to watch live in the program because there's a lot of different classes that have schedules that don't necessarily mesh. So we're going to be sending this link out for those of you who want to watch it. We're going to be sending the link of this video out this afternoon. It will be up almost immediately on YouTube for you to watch. Good afternoon, happy Constitution Day, and welcome to the Liberty Day Institute's Visiting Scholars video series, where we are always excited and proud to engage and interact with your elected officials, with those who represent you in various aspects of government. And today it's to celebrate Constitution Day with a special guest, Attorney General Cynthia Coffman of the state of Colorado. Attorney General Coffman, welcome back to the Liberty Days Visiting Scholars program, and congratulations on another year as in public service.
Thank you very much, Jimmy, and happy Constitution Day. It's a pleasure to be with you all.
Happy Constitution Day to you as well. Once again, I am Jimmy Sangenberger. I'm president of the Liberty Day Institute. Very pleased to be bringing you our Visiting Scholars video series once again today. Attorney General Coffman, today is the day before Constitution Day. It's Constitution Day Eve. Constitution Day, of course, is the day that recognizes on September 17th, 1787, when the Constitution was signed in Philadelphia by our nation's founding fathers. Why is Constitution Day important to you? I want to ask that question to start it off.
Well, as an elected official, I took an oath of office and swore that I would uphold the Constitution of the United States. So there's nothing more fundamental to the job that I do, representing the citizens of the state of Colorado, than knowing and following the Constitution. And that's what makes it such an important day for me.
What would you say the Constitution means to you? I'll ask you that question before we go to our list of student questions.
You know, it's words to live by. And the fact that it was put together by a brilliant group of folks who had lived through an extraordinary time at the beginning of our nation tells me that these are insights that we need to pay attention to. We need to honor the words, and we need to go back. When we're not sure what our course is to be as a country, we need to look back at what our founding fathers said and the world in which they lived to understand why those are our words to live by.
You know, there are some very interesting student-provided questions that I have for you today, Attorney General Coffman, and one of them kind of sticks along the theme that we're talking about, and it is, why do Americans always mention or emphasize the Constitution more, it seems, than other countries, and what makes our Constitution so different among the world?
You know, I think it's because our Constitution is about us. It's about you and me. It gives citizens the ability to govern themselves and determine how their country is run. And it's a very powerful vision of human freedom. I'll bet all of the students who are watching know that it's the oldest national constitution in the world. And in 1787, no other country in the world allowed its citizens to form their own government. So it is part of who we are as a country, and it empowers us as citizens to take charge of our country and how we are governed. And I appreciate the fact that Colorado students are taking time to study the Constitution in depth, because it tells me that you understand the document's importance in history.
Now, when we talk about the importance of the Constitution in history, I think you struck a chord with me in terms of how this was unprecedented. It really was something that we'd never seen before in the history of the world. Just as a quick little follow-up to that question, why do you think it matters that the Constitution, something of the United States of America, is so spectacularly different and unique among the world? What is kind of important about that?
I think it says a lot about what folks went through in getting to the United States and creating an environment for themselves and for the government that allowed for freedoms. They had been restricted and oppressed, and they were coming to a land of freedom. And I really think the document captures that, and it honors that value. And now we've gotten accustomed as Americans to being a free country. But when we look back at these words and the way the document is structured, I think we're reminded of where our country started. And I think that makes it a very important living document for us.
Very well put. Attorney General Coffman is our guest. I'm Jimmy Sangenberger, president of the Liberty Day Institute, and we're talking in celebration of Constitution Day. Another student question here. We know that there are a number of rights that are protected, Attorney General Coffman, under the U.S. Constitution. The Bill of Rights lays forth a number of those, and there are additional ones in the Constitution that are just guarantees and protections of those individual rights. Well, of course, there are not necessarily unlimited rights. There's always some sort of a limitation, at least it seems. So this question comes from another student, and it's, when is it constitutional to limit free speech? And how far can the government go to force people to be kind? How would you answer that question?
I like that. Well, the First Amendment of the Constitution, which we spent a lot of time learning about in law school, weeks, if you can believe this, guys, that we spent just studying what the First Amendment means. It is very broad, and the guarantee of free speech and the ability to express oneself is extended to us as Americans, except in pretty limited circumstances. And I remember my teachers in civics and again in law school talking about this case that was from 1969 called Brandenburg versus Ohio. I'm a lawyer, I have to throw in a case site. The classic one that says one cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. Now that's an exception to our freedom of speech, because the court said that yelling fire in a crowded theater isn't just the words that you're saying, it is causing a certain dangerous action on the part of those who hear it. So that's not protected speech. So threats to commit a crime, words that provoke a fight, and commercial advertising actually is not unlimited free speech. And harassment is another example where offensive language could provoke a violent response. So there are limited exceptions, but they're really important ones to protecting I think what we are as a country.
Now, how far, I really like this follow-up question that they had, this second question here. How far can the government go to force people to be kind? Is that something that you can do? I mean, we definitely want to have good citizenship, and I want to encourage every student to treat everybody with respect. But how does that kind of fit in with what the government can do as far as freedom of speech is concerned?
It's interesting, there's an expression that you can't legislate common sense. Well, you can't really legislate kindness. Teachers can teach it though, and I know that your teachers do, but it's really not the role and responsibility of the government to tell us what is or is not kind or how to accomplish that. What we do is we protect public safety. That's the role of government, and that's why you see these exceptions about things that would cause folks to panic or that would be a threat of a crime. It's a pretty high standard for what a person can't say.
Now, we talk about amendments to the Constitution. Attorney General Cynthia Coffman, our guest here on the Liberty Day Institute's Constitution Day edition of the Visiting Scholars series. But amending the Constitution, it's been done technically 17 different times because it was all at once that we ratified the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th Amendments, known as the Bill of Rights cumulatively. Then subsequently we had 17 other times that the Constitution was amended or thereabouts, leading us to 27 times the Constitution has been amended, which really isn't very many. So why is it so hard, one student asks, to amend or change the Constitution or to add on to the Constitution?
You know, I think we've made it hard for one reason, because we acknowledge the significance of the time in which the document was written and the freedoms it is intended to preserve, the direction it's intended to give our government about how our system works. If it's too easy to change the fundamental building blocks of a country, then you create opportunities for people to limit the rights of one group or another. Someone's always going to be the majority and someone will be in the minority. And if we think of situations in our country's history, Jimmy, where one group has wanted to discriminate against or close out another group, honestly, if it was easy to change the Constitution, that probably would have happened in this really important governing document. And that was not what the Founding Fathers intended. They wanted it to be difficult because that preserved the core nature of what the document meant to the people of this country, and it meant the majority was going to govern.
It is a very interesting study, the amending of the Constitution. It's been done so few times, and I think you laid it out quite well, Attorney General Coffman. Thank you. Next question from a student is, why do federal judges have life terms, and why aren't they voted on by popular vote? Curious question. What's your answer?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, the judicial branch was established to be separate and independent from our executive and legislative branches, and then Section 1 of Article 3 of the Constitution says that our federal judges shall hold their offices during good behavior. Now, that has the language that's been interpreted as giving federal judges lifetime appointments as long as they conduct themselves within the law. I think, frankly, having that independence is very significant, and as a practicing attorney, I want to see our judges, our federal judges, be neutral. If you are elected, if you're subject to the whims of the people, of the voters, as we sometimes use that expression, then the voters can sway that neutrality that we want a judge to have, and they won't make a decision that is unpopular, even though it might be correct under the law because they don't want to lose votes. I think it would change the whole character of our judicial system if we did that.
Very interesting. So looking at the three branches of government, I want to ask this supplemental question because you talked about the importance of the judicial branch and having it be an independent branch. Why do you think it's important that the Founding Fathers divided the Constitution into three different sections or branches of government, the legislative, executive, and judicial?
I think it's very significant because we want checks and balances in our government. We don't want one group of people, say the president of the administration, having more power than our legislature or our courts. Everyone has a role and they all work together in a system, and it should keep one part of government and one function from dominating the rest. It also keeps one branch of government from controlling, from doing something that is unpopular, that goes against what our laws say. We have to have somebody else who can come in and say, no, we can stop you if something is egregious.
We don't want one branch to have too much power or to trample upon the rights of individuals. I'm Jimmy Sangenberger. This is the Liberty Day Institute's Visiting Scholars video series for Constitution Day with our special guest, Colorado Attorney General Cynthia Coffman. You know, when we talk about the Constitution, there are very curious components to it, such as the Third Amendment, which forbids the quartering of soldiers in the homes of the people. Question from a student is whether or not the Third Amendment today is even relevant in our society. Curious question as well. What do you say to that?
It is. It's hard for us, I think, to imagine today that the government would tell us we have to accept soldiers into our homes, that we have to feed them and let them sleep under the same roof, maybe give up our beds for them because they're fighting for us. And much has changed, obviously, in history. Today, our federal government is not likely to force citizens to house soldiers, either in peacetime or in war, if we had a civil war. But I think what is important about the Third Amendment that makes it relevant today is that it decides a question between power and liberty, and it ensures our rights to be secure in our homes without military intrusion. I think of folks back in our history who would be asleep, and in the middle of the night, the knock would come at the door, probably pounding at the door, with soldiers coming in and disrupting a household and saying, we're staying here. Now we want to protect folks from that kind of intrusion.
It is interesting when you consider some of the aspects to the Constitution that seem to be maybe out of date or otherwise not relevant today, and you peel it back a little bit and find, well, maybe there is some relevance. Thank you very much, Attorney General Coffman. One more question here from students. This is an interesting one. Why isn't overspending by the government in our U.S. Constitution?
It's a really good question. It's one that current legislators ask, I think, because if ever there was an amendment that I can see being added to our Constitution in modern times, it is this balanced budget concept, because a lot of states have it, and many legislators and leaders think that it's important to have that balance in the budget so that Congress cannot overspend. Just like we're not supposed to write more checks than the money that we have in our accounts, or use our debit card more than we should, more than there's money in our account. But I think we have to look at the context of history on this one, because when the Founding Fathers met in 1787 for the Constitutional Convention, the United States had already incurred a lot of debt in order to pay for the Revolutionary War, and we were struggling to pay off those obligations, to figure out how we were going to take care of that debt. The fact that the United States was already dealing with a significant debt load, could explain why the balancing of a budget was not a priority back in that day. And in reading history, there are folks who say we should not have had a balanced budget amendment, shouldn't have it now, because the government has to be prepared for emergencies, for wars, for natural disasters. And we need that flexibility in our federal budget in order to overspend. That sounds like a convenient excuse to me.
Perhaps it could. Well, I want to wrap up this program, and we really appreciate you taking the time, Attorney General Cynthia Coffman, our guest, by asking you whether or not you could, and I'm certain you can, leave some final words of wisdom for our students on this Constitution Day Eve as we go into Constitution Day tomorrow as to why they should learn about the Constitution and American government, why it's important to understand your rights as citizens and as Americans.
Well, I think the fundamental reason why it's so important that you all are studying the Constitution is that you have to understand the freedoms that we have as in our country to understand what it is we're trying to protect, and why our system of government, our separation of powers, and the role of our military in protecting our country is so important. It really explains, it's the bones around which our whole society has been built. And sometimes when the actions of the government don't make sense, if we go back to the Constitution and we say, what was there? What was fundamental to the Founding Fathers and why? Then I think we understand who we are as a people, and we value and want to protect our country and our freedom even more.
Wonderful. Well, this is a very important occasion, Constitution Day, because we celebrate and recognize our freedoms as protected and guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. And this is the second time that we've done one of these Google Hangouts with you, Attorney General Coffman, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us once again for this important program and to express your views on some student questions today as we head into the weekend and to Constitution Week.
Now, is there cake and celebration associated with Constitution Day?
There should be. If there's no cake and celebration at your house, then you should start doing it.
Start it. All right, I like that idea.
So thank you very much. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to continuing this and having you engage with more students.
Thank you. I'd love to do that.
All right. Attorney General Cynthia Coffman here on Liberty Days. Constitution Day Google Hangout, we call it the Visiting Scholars video series. Thank you very much. For more information about what Liberty Day Institute does and how you can get involved or get materials for your classroom, go to libertyday.org today. That's libertyday.org. Thank you so much, and have a very great and happy Constitution Day.